Good morning. Local Utah author Sean O'Leary here with another book discussion. This is The Three Body Problem by Cixin Liu, and this was a really interesting book, and so I've got a bunch of things that I want to talk to you about it, and so I thought I would break this video into two parts. So this will be part one, and then in this part I just really want to talk about what went on in the book, and then in part two we'll talk more about some thoughts about that. So it was an interesting presentation because the author did not really explain what was going on in the book, didn't explain the plot, didn't really give you any hint as to what was going on. For like the first third of the book, I was like, okay, it's a story, but we don't really have a direction. And so that was interesting, because my feeling is that as an author, you really want to capture someone's imagination and get them on board as to what you're doing in the book within maybe the first 50 pages. That's pushing it, you know. You gotta hook them into the book in some way. So it was interesting that he didn't do that, and I kept going on it because it was an interesting story. I just wasn't sure why we were doing the things that we were doing, you know. What he was doing was setting everything up. He was setting the stage. He was setting the story up so that the rest of the story would make sense. But he took a long time to do that, really did it thoroughly, and as a reader, I kind of felt a little bit left out. That's not to say that it was bad. It was interesting. It was just like, and what does this have to do with three bodies? You know, for like a third of the story, I'm like, I don't even know why we're talking about three bodies. What's going on here, right? So, so in the beginning of the book, there's this main character, and I'm not going to remember the names. They were Asian names, not something that I'm familiar with. I'm bad at names as it is, so I'm not going to try to remember the names. I would write them down. I'm sure I horribly mispronounced the author's name. By the way, this was the first science fiction book to come out of China and won awards doing it. It really, it was a big milestone for them, and so and it's a really cool book, and I like it. It's very deep. So the beginning of the book, our main character is a young woman, and we're in the 1960s. And there's a cultural revolution going on in China, which, if I was up on my history, I would probably know about, but I don't really know about it. It made me mad because basically what happened was fascism got loose again in China. I really hate fascism. I hate fascists. If you've been listening to me for a while, you know that. And so what we had, the scene that we're given early on, is that these teenagers, I believe they're in college, so they're either teenagers or young adults, something like that, and it's more than questioning, it's more like an inquisition, and the youth, they were all dressed the same way. It reminded me very much of the talks about the Hitler Youth in Germany in the early 1930s, I think. Anyway, they were questioning, really putting the, and I guess the professors had to answer their questions. Why he just didn't walk away, it wasn't clear, unless he couldn't. And anyway, they became abusive, and they wind up murdering him on the stage. And then walking away, and his daughter, you know, goes up and holds his hand as he's dying. And it's very, but that's really important to the rest of the story. The way that the main character loses faith in humanity, and it really sprouts from that particular moment where she watched her world attack her father, attack science, attack education, and really turn their backs on truth and reason. So then there's that, and then she gets pulled into the military. This, I think they called it Redstone or something like that, and it's a military installation, and they have this radio antenna on top of it, and it's so powerful that anyone in the area, gets nauseous, and it disturbs the birds, and it kills the vegetation. It sounds like a military project, it's that kind of thing. So the military aren't that great either, right? They don't really care about people around them. And actually, before one more thing on her. Before she goes into the military base, she's friends with a reporter, and the reporter gives her a book that talks about harming the environment and deforestation, and then he writes a letter, and he wants to send it to someone in the government, and he writes it out. He's got it all written out, and it looks horrible. It looks like he was, on his 12th cup of coffee for the day as he's writing it out. And the main character, she has very nice handwriting, and so she offers to rewrite it for him. He signs it, but she rewrote it for him. She was acting almost as a secretary. Well, he sends it in, and they track it back to him, and he says, no, I had nothing to do with it. I didn't write that. And he throws her under the bus. And they come for her, and they say, hey, we know that you wrote this. And she admits and says, well, she doesn't want to throw him under the bus, but eventually she says, yeah, I wrote it, but I just copied it. I didn't write it. And then they accuse her of one thing after. They're railroading her, right? It's another reason why and the fact that he threw her under the bus for something that he wanted to do and she wasn't interested in. She again has more fuel to really hate humanity. Anyway, she winds up going to this military base, and they say, if you go into the base, you accept this assignment, you will never leave again. If you don't go into the base, the charges against you are fairly serious, and you'll probably go to prison for like 7 years or something like that. So anyway, she accepts the assignment and does what she needs to do, and then she finds out that they're sending these transmissions, and she's very, very smart, and her parents were very smart, and so she's able to very quickly fit in and use her talents to help them out in repairing and maintaining this stuff. So I don't want to go through all the details on the story, but they wind up contacting an alien race, and it's a little bit hard to tell you the order in which they did things because they jump around in the story quite a bit. But they also have a game that they're playing, like a video game that they're playing, and it's called Three Body. And in Three Body, they're on this world, and they don't understand what's going on, but they have these suns, and when the sun goes up and goes down very regularly, they say, I can't remember what they called it. It was a peaceful time or something like that, a prosperous time, right? And then if there's only darkness, then everything becomes very cold, and people would die, except they have the ability to dehydrate themselves, and then they can roll themselves up and put them on a shelf, and then when the time comes back where there's a stable, they call it a stable time, they unroll the people, they hose them down, and they rehydrate, right, and they come back to life. Sometimes, the one guy woke up and he's screaming because he's missing a finger because it was torn when he was, just a husk. So it's a really weird kind of thing, and they don't. So there are non-character players in the simulation, but then there are also characters who are other people on Earth who are playing this game, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And so I'm gonna give spoilers out. So if you haven't read the book, then you should probably stop here. So the aliens that they contact they find out that they're 4 light years away, which is where Alpha Centauri is, and Alpha Centauri has 3 suns, and so the idea is that they want to predict when it is that they'll have a stable period so that they can prosper. So what they do is during these stable periods, they science progresses and they build, and their society grows, and during the unstable times they kind of go into hibernation, right? And or they'll get destroyed. So one of the things that can happen is you can have 2 or even 3 suns in the sky at the same time, in which case it becomes so hot that it burns the planet, right? And then it destroys the civilization, and they have to start over again. And the game says that, and there were, I think, roughly 200 civilizations in the game that continually, they would get destroyed, and they would come back, and they would learn more, and they would progress. And so we've kind of gotten the back history of this world that they're living on. And I did not know, because I'm not a mathematician, that the 3-body problem is real, and that mathematicians have been studying this for 300 years, 300 or 400 years, something like that. And there is no closed form solution to the 3-body problem. For non-math, I've had enough math that I understand that. So let me explain that a little bit. So what you want to do is, you've got 3 bodies, and you know the positions and the velocities of the 3 bodies at the start of whatever. Pick any time. You go, I know the position and the velocity of these 3 bodies. What you would like is an equation that on the left side gives you the position and the velocity of the 3 bodies, and on the right hand side is the equation that you need to fill in, including time, right? The time between the start and the time that you're interested in. You put that in on the right hand side, and then on the left you'll get a future time, position, and velocity of all 3 bodies. Apparently that's impossible, and I don't know enough about it to tell you whether or not they have determined that that you cannot come up with an equation that does that, or that they just haven't been able to. But I believe that we still don't have what they call a closed form equation. Now, you can do numerical analysis where you go, well, I know where everybody is now, I know how fast they're going, I can go 5 minutes into the future, and then I'll know the new positions, the new velocities, and you keep doing that with a computer, right? So you can do that, but there's a lot of error associated with that. The smaller the time interval, like I said, 5 minutes, if you went 1 minute or 1 second or 1/100th of a second, those would make it slower and take it longer to calculate, but it would give you a better result. But also the problem is unstable, right? So very minor changes, like if you get the velocity, if you don't know it exactly, that's error, right? Anyway, I didn't even know that this was a thing, and so they're kind of struggling on this world to understand how can they predict the future, and they finally get to be a space-faring race, and then they become aware of they send out a broadcast, and they hear it, and they respond back, and when they get the response, it's our main character who gets the response from the aliens. And one of the things that she gets is not only, I don't think she ever heard the full response from like the government response. What she got back was a sentinel on there who wrote back and said, "We're a very warring race. Do not respond." And I loved it because the guy said 3 times, which is, I tell you 3 times. It's a big thing in literature that I've told you 3 times, don't do this. And he says, do not answer, because if you answer, they'll be able to figure out exactly where you are and they'll come and conquer you. And she immediately responds back because she's had it with the human race. She says, we're not worth saving. If you come here, I'll help you overthrow the human race. And so that was really an interesting and big thing for her. And so they wind up launching all these spaceships to come to Earth and overthrow Earth. And then the guy in charge says, they're not going to. We've lost. We're not going to be able to overthrow them. And they go, well, we're much more advanced than they are. What do you mean we won't be able to throw them? And at the speed that they can travel, it's going to take them 450 years to get to Earth. And she said they'll continue to advance in 450 years. Our ships won't. And so they'll surpass us. By the time we get there, they'll easily be able to defeat us. Anyway, they decide that they need to undermine their ability to further themselves in science and learn about subatomic particles, and they send these microcomputers in the form of protons to try to keep the scientists from learning more. Anyway, I think that's where I want to stop. That's the plot of the book and the reasoning behind. And there's this whole community now that becomes aware of this, and they're all on this woman's side, and they all want to help the aliens because they've had it with humans, because they're all greedy and they're all about money and bettering themselves, and they don't care if they destroy the planet. So those are kind of the themes behind it. I think in the next part, I would like to talk a little bit more about how I feel about those themes and some corollaries that I see in other writing. So I'm going to stop right now. I'll just say that the book was there were problems for me in how it was presented, but I thought that when you finish reading the whole book and you look back on it, you go, okay, this was really well done, really well thought out, and really sets everything up. But it does mean that for quite a while you're going to be a bit lost as to what's going on. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will put out part 2 soon, and we'll wrap up this conversation. Have a wonderful day. Bye. Local Utah author Sean O'Leary here with part 2 of the 3-body problem. So I broke this into 2 parts because there were different things that I wanted to talk about. So in part 1, we talked about the plot of the book. We talked about what happened and a little bit about what the different characters did. I didn't talk about all the characters. There are there are more characters in the book so the characters are interesting. The plot the administration, his administration, because he's in the year 2040 when we pick up the book. The administration is doing that he disagrees with, right? What is happening in American politics that is bad for America and the world? And he criticizes them, and he writes these. He does video blogs and blogging and writing articles and stuff. So he gets caught up in this. He gets caught up in this thing where the government basically releases a plague, and a third of everyone on the earth dies, and including his whole family. And so he's left alone, and in this state where he's alone and he's kind of trying to figure out how to put his life back together again, he discovers that he has a power that no one else has had that he knows of before, and that's the ability to move objects. Well, it's the first ability that he finds, right? He can move objects, he can lift them off the ground without touching them. And then over the course of the rest of the book, he realizes or discovers that he's omnipotent. And he asks the question, what should I do with this power? Do I need to do something with this power? And the obvious answer is what he's been doing his whole life, is he's been trying to make the world a better place. And so he goes about and he tries to fix everything that's wrong with the world. And that's where I want to compare it with the three-body problem. Our first main character, she sees the very bad side of humanity, and they kill her father. I think they kill her sisters, and I don't think we ever find out what happened to her mom. But she's really betrayed by people. She's betrayed by the guy who wrote the article, the environmentalist guy, and she really loses faith in humanity. And feels like there has to be a change, that this is not what the world should be, right? So she wants to make a change as well, and she doesn't have any special powers, but she accidentally discovers and makes contact with an alien race who, by the way, would like to wipe out humanity and take over the earth because their world is unstable and has been killing civilizations on it for eons. And so kind of the theme between the two of them is both of them feel like there's something wrong with humanity, and they want to change it, right? In the three-body problem, there's a large group of people who really want to destroy humanity and start over, right? And that's one thing that you could do, is let's get rid of all the humans and let's bring in an alien race, and maybe some of us who aren't trying to destroy the planet, aren't trying to kill